I want to talk with you today about visas for religious workers. This is a fairly flexible category in some ways, but fairly restricted in others. And so there's a lot of questioning about whether a particular person can qualify or can't qualify based on their type of religious work and what it is that they're hoping to do with one church or religious institution or another. Are looking for two things. We're looking for a qualified institution, that is often a church or another body of religious practitioners, or it might be a denomination specifically, it might be a independent ministry. So in this visa category, when we're looking to qualify someone as a religious worker, we want to make sure that the person is qualified. We also want to make sure that the religious institution is qualified. So what are those qualifications that we're looking for? Well, for the person applying for the visa, we want to make sure that if they're inside the United States, they're still in valid status of some sort. So we're looking at changing their status. If they're not going to be able to maintain their status for the time that it'll take to get everything in order and filed, then it may be necessary for them to go through a consulate outside the United States. One of the most important documents we look for on the side of the sponsoring organization is what's called an IRS determination letter. This is a letter saying that the organization is a registered 501c3. For many churches or other institutions, they may have one of those in the name of their individual church, or they may be part of a larger denomination, larger organization that has one and has included this particular body of believers or this particular church underneath their umbrella. It can work either way, but we look to be able to trace that line of documentation all the way up to the IRS. Often that gets down to just the level of cooperation that we have, for example, between the individual church and the larger denomination that they're part of. Once we get over those hurdles with the sponsoring organization, both establishing adequate funding and establishing that there is an IRS determination somewhere that we can link this entity to, then it often becomes a matter of drilling down on the job description for this particular role. And that's something that we go over with a fine-tooth comb. I'm often going to push clients to drill down on an hour-by-hour breakdown in a given week of how this person would be expected to spend their time. And we want to go into specific detail about anything that relates to the ministry work that the person will be doing, teaching, preparing ministerial materials, preparing for instruction, guiding people, doing things that we typically think of a minister doing. Those are some key points of the requirements that we look for in a religious worker visa. Other things to consider about this visa category that make it attractive for a lot of situations are, it is a non-immigrant visa initially, or in many cases initially, but there is also an immigrant visa component. What does that mean? That means that if I meet these general eligibility requirements, I can generally qualify for the R1 category as a religious worker to be in the United States for a temporary period of time working in ministry. However, if I meet those requirements, I'm generally going to also meet the requirements as a special immigrant religious worker, which means that I can apply for permanent resident status for myself, my spouse, and my minor children. And so that gives it both a short-term and a long-term perspective. You'll notice in a lot of these employment relationships that things change over time in any organization, most especially churches. And so it's good to have a long-term vision of how this is going to work out, both on the part of the employer and on the part of the employee at the outset. But it certainly has long-term potential for an entire family, and that can be a huge plus. In addition to having both a short and long-term potential, this visa category gives us the opportunity also for some flexibility, less in the structure of the entity doing the petition, more so in the history of the relationship between them, and being able to draw from a wider range of potential candidates than we might expect. So even if someone has been part of, say, another denomination, another sect of a religion, as long as it can be established that the beliefs between the two denominations are substantially similar, it's okay. That's not a prohibiting factor. It's also not a requirement for a specific level of education unless it's required by that religious organization for that role. So there is flexibility in who can meet these requirements, but we do often spend a lot of time working with both the potential employee and the potential employer in order to get everything in order and present a complete picture to USCIS from the outset. When we can do that, it's a good option to be able to seek what's called premium processing, which means that USCIS can process an application package within a maximum of 14 days, at least in order to give a preliminary response or request additional evidence. In government terms, that's lightning speed. So when we can do that, we really like to. And if you have questions about this visa category, or if you'd like to sit down and see if this might be an option for you or for your religious organization, I'd be happy to talk with you about that.